During a debate on the treatment of the Windrush generation, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn hit out at the Prime Minister, who, as Home Secretary, was reportedly responsible for the destruction of the migrants' landing cards. BBC presenter Andrew Neil repeated the savage comeback during BBC Daily Politics and said the argument should have been an open goal for the Labour leader. Mr. Neil said, as expected, the leader of the opposition went on the whole Windrush issue, which we were discussing before we went to the PMQs. We thought it was pretty much an open goal for the leader of the opposition and it looked that way too. Getty BBC Windrush generation, Jeremy Corbyn demanded Mrs May must not blame officials. In heated PMQs, this rather took the wind out of Mr Corbyn's sails on that matter. Andrew Neil, the Prime Minister, did apologise to the Windrush generation and this associated with it for what had happened to them, but then Mr Corbyn wanted to know why the government had destroyed the landing cards of those who had come before 1971, largely from the Caribbean. The Prime Minister stood up and said, actually it had been the Labour government in 2009 that had legislatively decided to destroy the cards. Although the destruction itself wasn't done until 2010, but this rather took the wind out of Mr Corbyn's sails on that matter. Doing the lively PMQs, Mr Corbyn asked the Prime Minister if she had ordered for the destruction of the migrants' landing cards. Mrs May hit back and said, no, the decision to destroy the landing cards was taken in 2009 under a Labour government. Parliament erupted following the comments and demanded Mr Corbyn apologise. In response, a caught-out Mr Corbyn then demanded absolute clarity on Mrs May's statement and said she should not blame officials. A Downing Street spokesman confirmed that the business case for destroying the landing cards was approved under Labour in June 2009, but the decision to begin the destruction began when Mrs May was Home Secretary in October 2010. The spokesman said, I don't know if she was made specifically aware of it. The Windrush famines, named after the Empire Windrush ship which initially brought families over to rebuild post-war Britain, became subject to the ruling in 2012 which aimed to put an end to overstaying. Their legal status changed overnight despite living, working and paying tax in Britain for decades, because they do not have sufficient paperwork to prove they have the right to be in the UK. The Windrush migrants were advised that they need to produce evidence including passports, to continue working or receiving treatment from the NHS, but the majority arrived in Britain on parents' passports and never applied for travel documents. Albert Thompson, a 63-year-old mechanic, was evicted and asked for £54,000 to pay for radiotherapy cancer treatment. He said, they're asking me to prove I'm British. I feel abandoned. His case has still not been resolved.